there's those alarms going off, and they're saying everybody go back to your areas. Something's going on. And the barber kicked me out of the chair with half my head shaved and the other half done. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, you got to go. Like, so I said, all right. So I ran out of there. I ran back to my area. I got right where my room was just as the towers were starting to fall. And that's when it hit me that, not only is the country at war, but I'm at war. Within 20 minutes, the loudspeakers are going off. They were telling us we're going to be a target. We're coming, expect something to happen here. The Marines are running around with machine guns trying to get on the walls. And mind you, I am 18 years old. I know almost nothing about the military. I am literally the least prepared person in the entire military for anything that's going to happen. And one of my, guy who's a junior came up to me and said, hey, here's a baseball bat. Go out and stand by that door and don't let anybody in that has a military ID. And so that's how I spent my first day of war, was half my head shaved, standing with a baseball bat, wondering if anybody was going to come through that door.
Bernard Glockner died in 1876. It is recalled that the funeral cortege was the largest ever seen in the city.
This is the Local Legends Podcast.
How's my angle over there?
I'll get some BTS,
Bro, you're looking tight. You're looking tight. Cheers, bro.
Thanks for having me.
We're live on the Local Legends Podcast. This is episode 44, and I'm in the Glockner Speakeasy with a new friend of mine and storyteller, producer, writer, Chase Millsap.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Vet. Asterisk. That's a big one for the things that you
That's
create.
part of it.
Yeah.
PSKC. Legend.
Legends never die.
9 a.m.
Dale's in the room. It's a vibe.
That's right.
He's like a couple Bernies deep. I could see he only had like 2 left on that six pack.
Sometimes you just gotta have a fan club.
I know, man. It's good stuff. Chase, I can't remember who told it to me. I'm terrible at citing sources, so forgive me. But the quote was, "Don't share advice, share your experience." Mm-hmm. And that was like kind of top of mind for me going into like writing a little bit for your interview, because I clocked that immediately how, honestly, your real life experience is grafted into the stories that you create. And so, like I said, I noticed that immediately in how you, whatever the medium or project or platform, you have a few going, right? And you got your hands in a few things. You recontextualize those same experiences to create something fresh. So I think the best thing we can do is just start by letting you tell your story. Like, what were those things that happened overseas? How did you get into the Marines? And like, how does that continue to drive what you create?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, being a storyteller and being where I'm at today was never part of the plan. I mean, I fell into it just by experience. And for me, as I was thinking back to that one point that had that profound change on me was my grandfather. And he asked me one day what credit was. And like any other kid in high school, I kind of looked back and said, that's what my mom and dad used to like buy stuff. Which, we can buy a lot of things on credit. And he looked at me, and this is a guy who had lived through the Depression and gone through that and served in World War II. And he looked me right in the eyes and he said, "Nah, credit is your word. And the more you live up to that is the more credit you have. And every time you don't live up to that, you just lose something else."
Right.
And he said he's lived his whole life in the Depression, whether it was trying to find food or work or whatnot, just off his own personal credit. And this is also a guy that didn't carry credit cards. So it all came full circle, and that stuck with me. And that was something that I remember before I ever joined the military, was that your credit, your word, the things that you say you're going to do matter. Yeah. And that is sort of what drove me towards the military. As a guy that grew up in the 90s, I mean, I watched a lot of movies, and, my most favorite one being, Independence Day, right? Because it wasn't a big conflict going on, so it was, aliens attacked, and the Marines were the first to respond. So I thought, that's pretty cool. I want to join the Marine Corps, and that's honestly how I got attracted to the Marine Corps, and thought I was going to be a pilot. That's what I really wanted to do, and so went through high school and tried to study really hard, and I was coming from Texas, and so I wanted to to get out and see the world. And I can remember having, one of my final kind of like, when you're trying to get scholarships and you're trying to get into college and all that, and they asked me and said, well, what do you think your life looks like in the military? And I remember thinking, like, I don't know, I guess I'm on a ship somewhere and like nothing's happening and like maybe we go in a place. And as I was saying it, it kind of sounded boring and it just hit me and I thought, okay, well, I still want to do this. And so I ended up at the Naval Academy in June of 2001. And 2 months later, in my freshman year, was 9/11, and I was at the academy on 9/11. And I can remember, and this is a very small piece of this whole story, but yeah. So I was getting a haircut on 9/11, and the barber's got the razor halfway up my head, and I start seeing people had their pagers are going off, right? And this is 2001, so it's not like there's a lot of cell phones around. And I kept thinking, like, something's up. And then we heard it over the loudspeaker that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. And the next thing I know, everybody has to leave. Like, there's those alarms going off, and they're saying, everybody go back to your areas. Something's going on. And the barber kicked me out of the chair with half my head shaved and the other half done. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, you got to go. Like, so I said, all right. So I ran out of there. I ran back to my area. I got right where my room was just as the towers were starting to fall. And that's when it hit me that, not only is the country at war, but I'm at war. And within 20 minutes, the loudspeakers are going off. They were telling us we're going to be a target. We're coming, expect something to happen here. The Marines are running around with machine guns trying to get on the walls. And mind you, I am 18 years old. I know almost nothing about the military. I am literally the least prepared person in the entire military for anything that's going to happen. And one of my, guy who's a junior came up to me and said, hey, here's a baseball bat. Go out and stand by that door and don't let anybody in that has a military ID. And so that's how I spent my first day of war, was half my head shaved, standing with a baseball bat, wondering if anybody was going to come through that door, wondering if a terrorist or somebody was going to come through that door. Now, they didn't. There wasn't anything going on. But it shook me in the point where I said, I am so unprepared for what is happening right now that I need to spend every single day from now until the day I leave the military preparing for whatever might come. And that's what led me to the Marine Corps. That's what led me to the infantry. And that's what got me to Iraq.
Wow, man. Yeah, that story is wild. I mean, do you think because it was so because it was so odd, you're like in the barber's chair, a half-finished haircut, all that led into it probably being like a more memorable experience?
Yeah. I mean, the personal side of it was I thought I just looked ridiculous.
How old were you at the time?
I was
again?
18 years old.
Okay.
And so, just barely hanging on. And I hadn't even really started my first year. I mean, we were weeks into my first semester of college.
Right.
And so I passed through the summer and we were getting ready to start. And that's when it started to get real very fast.
Yeah.
And I knew that I had another 3.5 years left to go at the academy. And so my focus was, how do you get out? How do you train yourself for war? Because I knew that was coming.
Sure.
And then if it's going to happen, then how do I get to the front lines as fast as possible? That was where my young head was at.
And so how did your service progress from there, Chase?
So ended up graduating in 2005 as a Marine. Went down to Quantico, where they teach the infantry school. So went through the initial training, went through about 9 months of training in the infantry. And Quantico in February is really cold.
Yeah.
And I was with a couple of buddies of mine. It was icing outside, and we were still out in the middle of a patrol, in a practice patrol. And I remember looking over at my buddy and thinking, and actually told him, I was like, if we make it out of this, like, we need to go to Key West and get like warm again. Like, that's what we're gonna do. And so I'm down in Key West. I'm with a couple of Marine buddies of mine, and we're doing what 22-year-old Marines do, and we're having a good time. And one of my friends decides to have too good of a time, and the next thing I know, he ends up in jail. And this is not where I wanted to be to start my first career as a Marine. And we're not only Marines, we're Marine officers, right? We're about to take over platoons. We're going to be in charge of people.
Right.
Getting in trouble with the law is not something you want to do.
Sure.
So I remember this. I'm at Monroe County Jail in Key West, Florida. And my buddy comes out, and me and another guy are going to pick him up. And I'm standing there, and I feel this hand on my shoulder, and it is a Navy officer, a lieutenant, and I knew immediately that we were in so much trouble. And he looked at us and he said, "Are you guys the Marines?" And we were like, "Yes, sir, we are." And he asked us for our names, and we told him, and he's like, "You're Millsap?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You need to call back to the base." So I called back, and my boss told me, he said, "Hey, there's been an incident in Iraq. You are going next week. Pack your bags, get to California. You're going to war." And so I literally left the jail. I didn't even see my buddy get out.
Wait, but do you think like your little brush with the law there kind of kick-started you to the front lines?
That's what I thought. I thought I was being punished. And when I finally called back, they told me, they said, "Hey, no, you were on the list. This was your unit."
Okay.
So I did. I packed my bags and I drove across the country. I had a chance to see my mom for half a day, and then I saw my grandfather for the last time. And I looked at him. I went to him and I had a chance to sit with him, and I showed him the vehicles I was going to be using. And this was 2006. This is right before the summer of 2006. And I remember him looking at me and saying, "Remember that your credit is your word. And credit is all that matters." And this was a guy that survived the Japanese, survived the Philippines, had done that. Right. And I could tell that he was really scared. And that shook me for a minute, because I thought I was prepared, and the Marines do a really good job of telling you and training you. But he knew something that I didn't. And ended up in California, and literally within a matter of days was on a plane by myself with all my gear to Iraq. And that's when I showed up right before the summer of 2006.
Wow.
Yep.
Crack on that note, Bill.
Listening to Nickelback and his Xterra.
I did have a Nissan Xterra, and I did listen to Nickelback.
It's an important detail.
Funny local legend story. There was another gentleman that had a Nissan Xterra listening to Nickelback at that exact same time. His name's Dale King.
Just for the record.
Just for the record.
So yeah, fast forward to what you're doing now, Chase. Tell us a little bit about what you're involved in, because I want to get to where these worlds intersect, how you started creating out of your experiences. But now, Chief Content Officer at We Are the Mighty, executive producer of like a new thing you're working on, which is No Way in Hell, which is really cool. It was cool to read that on Deadline. Tell us, what else?
Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't go to film school. I naturally fell into storytelling, and for me, it was about when we were overseas, and I was in charge of. At that point, I was in charge of 31 Marines. Years later, I would be in charge of Iraqis. At different points, I was in charge of different units, and I found storytelling to be a really effective tool to help people get on the same page, to help people understand the world we're going in. And it's just as simple as saying, tonight we're going to go out in the city, we're going to go do this patrol, and then we're going to come back, and here's how this is all going to happen. And it was just a story. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's arcs and all of those things. I naturally fell into that. While I was there, I started writing these experiences down and journaling, mostly because there really wasn't internet at that point. And in a lot of cases, as a leader, you're alone. And so instead of just kind of shooting it with the rest of the guys, I would journal. And a lot of those journals are what I use now to kind of inspire this. And so, long story short, that experience kind of brought me to the point where I knew I wanted to be a storyteller. I knew I wanted to write. That was something that I enjoyed doing. And then it got me to the point where, as I was trying to, I'd moved out to Hollywood. This is years later. I'd met my wife, who's from the West Side. And that was my connection to Portsmouth. I met my wife in L.A. and she was working in entertainment, and I was sort of watched for a couple of years of how this went down, and really got the bug for it and said I could do this. I think this is really cool. I like doing being out here. I like being on the storytelling side. I like being on the creative side, and it was right about that time. And mind you, I wasn't planning this to happen. I was actually going to school to go into politics. Like, that's what I thought I wanted to do.
Sure.
And then I realized, that's not really a fun business, and that's a totally different direction.
Well, and so your wife's experience in the production space, had a big impact on you as well?
Yeah. So little known story is, my wife was working on The Big Bang Theory at the time, and
What's that? No, I'm just
yeah, exactly. That's the show everybody knows. I was in the military. I was on the East Coast, and I was flying back and forth to come see her. And we had to write a paper at that point about culture. The military wanted you to learn about cultures and all these things. And mostly I just went to my boss and was trying to BS and said, hey, I'd really like to write about the Hollywood culture. And he looked at me and he's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, no, seriously, like these people are doing things differently. Like let me get into this and I need an extra day off. And he was like, so let me get this straight. You're just going to fly to LA to hang out with your girlfriend? And I was like, I'm actually going to go on set too. And I got a chance to interview the director of The Big Bang Theory, a couple of the writers, the producer, and really talk through what that culture of storytelling looks like.
Wow.
Those same people that I interviewed are many of the people I work with on US Eval today. So it's kind of a small knit group. But what it gave me an understanding that this world wasn't impossible. Right? It's not possible to be in TV. It's just a matter of commitment, passion, and doing those things. And so I jumped all in. And my first real go at this is I got a phone call from an Iraqi that I'd served with, and I'm in the middle of LA, and he calls me and says, I need to get out of Iraq. They're coming after me, and can you help me? And I didn't have any idea what to do. I'd never been trained for anything like this. All I knew is that I had friends with a camera, and this was a powerful story, and that if I could go tell that story, then it might be able to help them. And so I got a chance with my brother, who actually works at National Geographic. I called him and I said, hey, man, I got a heck of a story for you. And he couldn't believe it. He said, you want to go follow a guy you served in Iraq with as he's fleeing as a refugee? And I said, yeah, I do. And they bought it, and a couple weeks later, we were on a plane, and we went and filmed it. And that was my first story.
Wow, man.
Yep.
And if you didn't, I'm just thinking like anybody else that didn't have the same kind of tactical experience that you had could not like go capture that. Like it'd just be impossible.
Yeah, it was really dangerous.
Yeah.
It was not the smartest thing I've ever done. But I was passionate, right? And I knew that, and I was also young, a little bit younger than now. And for me, it was personal, and I knew this guy. I had served with him in Iraq. He'd saved my life while we were there years before, kind of about that same 2006 time frame. And it came back to what my grandfather said: it's credit, and it's about what your word. And when this is a guy that I served with, and when I said, "Hey, man, if there's anything I can do to help, let me know." And when he called me on that, I said, "Okay, I'm on my way." And we filmed it, and we did a short film for National Geographic, and that's part of the story of No Way in Hell. It's a little part of it. But along the way, I got to take a camera, a couple miles from Syria. We were all over. We were in the middle of the refugee crisis, and it showed me that being able to capture some of these powerful stories can change people's minds. And I was able to bring that film back, and showed it around the country. And that was my first start. That was my in, as they say.
Wow, man. I love how the things that you're doing. I feel like when real world experience is not a part of the equation, a lot of like what's created in Hollywood or just I guess any medium is like mainly academic. You know what I mean? It's not actionable. Like the very first thing you create is extremely actionable. Like you're trying to save someone from a life-threatening situation. You know what I mean? Which it doesn't obviously get like any higher stakes or meaningful than that. So those are the kind of things, I guess, like you're saying, you are bringing to the table for like the No Way in Hell project and United States Eval thing.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, and this is, every writer knows this, like you write what you know.
Yeah.
Right. So if you ever see me around town, just like kind of taking notes by myself, it's because I'm writing things down that I see that I'm going to probably use later.
Yeah.
Right. There's things that happen in all of our lives that just become amazing tools for storytelling.
Right.
Whether it's something that people say or experience, or even down to the bumper stickers that are on some people's cars, like they're just, you start to get to recognize these things, and that's what informed US Eval. Is when I had a couple of those writers that I had met on The Big Bang Theory came to me, gosh, it was about 2017, and said, "Hey, we want to do a comedy around an interpreter coming to live with a Marine." And I was like, I don't necessarily know if that's a comedy. I don't know. I don't see it like you guys see it. And then we worked through it, and it started to come out, and we realized that there was a lot of funny there. There was the new experiences whether you're the vet coming home, which I lived some of those experiences myself. Some are funny, some are a little harder than others. And then there's the immigrant experience, where people coming over and going to the DMV for the first time, learn how to drive for the first time, going to the grocery store for the first time. Those are all fun, interesting experiences. And so that was our first season. We played around with it a lot. We had a lot of fun with it. And then we came into season 2, and that's where it got a little bit more interesting. And we never, obviously that we didn't plan this, but we were writing season 2 as Afghanistan was falling. And again, what sort of happened is this fun-loving world that we built was was put up against what we knew was a real life scenario. And as storytellers, we had to make a decision of saying, do we want to just bypass that, or do we want to lean in on what's authentic? And we did that. And we leaned in on the real world experiences that were people having. And that's the fun part of the show, even though it's a sitcom, and you got Dean Norris, who's the guy from Breaking Bad, on there as the dad, and you've got some younger actors, Parker in it here especially, who are having a lot of fun. They're singing and they're dancing. They're, Parker's working out in his garage. Like, those are all the fun parts. But everyone stepped up and said, hey, how can we help tell this right? And every part of that show is based on somebody's real experience. Somebody's lived that version of it. And so that's what we use as the bedrock of that show. And so, yeah, it takes up a lot of my time. We're going through, we're about halfway through season 2 right now. Hoping to get to season 3. So watch Thursdays, 8:30, right after Young Sheldon. And I think you'll have a lot of fun with it. We try to be funny. We really do. There's a lot of jokes in there. So that's one part of it. But then I get to tell, other stories like No Way in Hell, and lean in on that. And so I get to write, scripts around that are features and feature films and things like that.
I watched the pilot episode a couple days ago, and my favorite joke from that is when the dude's sitting at the table and he's saying, I couldn't really ever settle down because the Taliban's hunting me. Yeah. And the chick's like, yeah, dating's hard, It
is. It's hard. It is hard.
I like that American disconnect kind of thing, you know what I mean?
It's we have a lot of fun with that, and I'll tell you what's been really cool is, when we were throwing out ideas of where the family is going to be based,
it's Ohio.
I threw out Ohio, and I said, hey, what about Ohio? And then they said, well, what about Columbus, Ohio? And I said, well, all right, let's do Columbus, Ohio. And then it really became an excuse to come back here to Portsmouth a lot and go see things and go look at things and really do research for the show and think, okay, what is it? What is Ohio like? And my wife grew up here. I didn't. So it was a chance for me to really get out and explore Ohio and take that back to the show. And so we, did that last year. And then, over the since November of last year, I've been able to be remote. So for me, it's been fun. I've been able to live in kind of two worlds between.
One of the most interesting things about your story and just what you do for a living, it's like a constant example of art imitates life, life imitates art kind of thing.
That's exactly it. I didn't plan it like that.
Yeah.
But it's the groove I fell into. And I think it, and the more and more I study storytelling, right? I mean, if you go back all the way back to sitting around a fire talking about stories, I mean, that is what it is. It is life experience that you can take and translate and entertain first. It's all about entertaining and keeping people's attention. And if you can do that, then you can go on and do anything else from there. So
right. And what do you like? I'm just a big believer in myself because I've seen it play out in my own life with just the little bit of work I've done, and just even working with the Glockners. I feel like their business people really started taking notice. I mean, they have this huge, very successful multi-generational legacy business, but people really started taking notice online when they started storytelling instead of advertising. Yep. It's a completely different thing. I think people get really exhausted, and it's that line, advertisers ruin everything. Yeah. So when you're constantly pitching a car to somebody, it's just not very engaging, right? But as soon as the building went up, they're resurrecting in June of 2018, they resurrect their original family, the original building their family business started out of. People took huge notice of that. People took huge notices of us bringing up all these old stories. Not everybody, I think, is a storyteller, but everyone wants to participate and has a place to participate in story, just like on a human level, right?
That's 100% right. I mean, there's no, you don't have to pay a tax to tell a story. Like, there's no buy-in.
Right.
It's just doing it. It's working on your craft. And I think you nailed it on the head. Is like, you build that craft over time. It's no different than being a welder or woodworker, or any sort of artist. Is you build that craft and you look at it, and I think that's what's made this podcast and that story really interesting. Is like, we all have our buying a car experience.
Yeah.
But now you have a hometown experience, right? You have something that you can connect to, and that we all can connect to from there. And
right.
And that's what we try to do, in the show, and especially US of Al, but a lot of the projects I work on.
Like talking a little bit about We Are the Mighty, that has like a massive following. It's very story driven. I read the blogs and stuff that you guys put up, and you're writing a lot of content. So you moderate everything that goes on the platform.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, I do. And so, I mean, this is one of those things that it really did fall into my lap. And when I got back from Turkey, where I had gone and shot my first documentary, I was out doing the film festival circuit and was showing people this, and I was at the end of a screening, and this guy and I started talking, and he is a guy named David Gale, who used to run NTV Films. He made things like Napoleon Dynamite, and Jackass, and Pootie Tang, and he had made 30 successful movies, and I didn't know who he was at that point, and he was telling me that he was starting a new company called We Are the Mighty, and it was all about storytelling for veterans and the military community. And naturally, my ears perked up, because I thought, well, that's cool. I know a little bit about that, and this is storytelling, and it's Hollywood, and it just seemed like all my worlds were coming together. And what was really funny about it is I was talking to him. He's saying, I saw this story of this guy who went back to help an Iraqi that he'd served with, and I was like, no, that was me. He goes, no, that wasn't you. And I'm like, no, that was me. And I knew that at that moment I was not an actor, but I was a storyteller. And I said, hey, look, no, seriously, that was me. I'd love to talk more to you about, more about the company. And that was it. And so was hired very soon after that. And came on to help build out their storytelling aspects and the film and television group that they were working on. And this is a group of veterans in Hollywood who came together and said, we have a lot of stories and experiences, from all generations, right? Not just the post 9/11, not just those of us who had our head shaved on 9/11, that thing. But we looked at it and said, whether you put on the uniform or you've taken it off, that idea of service, right? Service to a community, service to others, that is the bedrock of all of our different stories. And so we really lean in on that, and we do things from, things about heroism on the battlefield. We do things about lifestyle. We've had a cooking show. I mean, we get to do a lot of different creative storytelling, but it's grounded in that idea that, whether, the military and others like that, right? Law enforcement, that they all come together to serve other people. And so that's the bedrock of our company, that's the storytelling. And so US of Al is kind of, an example of that, of one of the different projects we have. And we have, some others out there that we've done over the last few years. We did a show about boot camp. Like I said, we did a cooking show. We've got a couple movies, including No Way in Hell. And so I get a chance to oversee that and all of the storytellers that come through our doors.
Well, what I want to point out about how you're moving, Chase, and even in these business scenarios, you have this really accomplished professional in front of you. And when you meet this guy, you're all the way you're talking, your goal is not to cut a check. It's like this interests me. This is my passion. What I'm good at. This is where I can storytell, create, kind of thing. Yep. And I think that's the major differentiator for what you're doing in business. You and Dale have a lot of things that align in that way. And it's something that I want to point out for the other people in this that have a desire to be entrepreneur or are doing things in the community is it doesn't have to be so qualitative, every move you make, everything you post on Facebook or I guess do with your business doesn't have to be a direct sell. There has to be some kind of life behind it, something that you're passionate about promoting in a way that like enriches other people on another level other than it's like selling them a product, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, and I would probably tell you that I'm the worst business case example in business school. Like, don't follow my path, right? Like, I there are a lot of different red flags along the way when, I had worked a corporate job. I had done things where it just didn't feel right, and I was doing what I thought what I was supposed to do. And that I just knew in my gut that was wrong. And so, that's when, like literally getting up, going overseas, trying to film a documentary without ever touching a camera, like that didn't make a lot of sense. But I did it because I was passionate about it. And, for me, there's an adventure aspect, there's an entrepreneurial spirit to it. But I always knew that, if you did good work, if you honed your craft, then like the finances side of it would figure itself out, right? The business side of it will figure itself out. And I'm not saying that's for every business, and I think you have to have a plan, no doubt. But for me, it has always been about focusing on your craft.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the real success variable is creative. Like even if you're running Facebook ads or you're fashioning your career, like if you're doing something interesting that other people connect to, like that creative aspect of it, that completely determines whether or not they lose interest in a month or in your product, whatever like the financial aspect of it, or it's something that's like truly enriching and they want to participate in.
And that's what you and I were talking about this before we started. Like that's where we're at here in the end of 2021 and going into 2022. I mean, yes, when I first started, you had to have an actual camera that we take over, and there's a sound and all those things, and like we did that because we wanted to be on the screen. Right. The technology has caught up to this point where you can literally take your cell phone out and tell a story. You can do it every single day. You can do it as much as you want to do it. So there's no barrier to entry. The barrier is in your own mind and the passion for it. And so finding that, finding your niche, finding the area you want to go into, go down that hole and see where it takes you. For me, I'm exploring, kind of that bridge between my military experience and coming home. I've got a lot of other stuff I want to do next. But that's where that's where I've landed here today. And like I said, it took years. It took literally 4 years for some of these projects to get set up. And that's just part of the process.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, let's elaborate on that relationship between art and business. So what you're doing for We Are the Mighty, and like the content you're creating is art. That is the focus. But there's behind it, there's this massive growing platform, like all these financial implications as well. How do you see the relationship between good storytelling? Have you seen the platform grow since you've been part of the equation? Tell us a little bit about the specifics there.
Yeah,
I think that'd be helpful for the people listening that are trying to do the same thing, man. Maybe on a smaller scale with their local market, but.
Yeah. Like I said, I got very lucky, right? I had fallen into a group of storytellers, David Gale specifically, who knew their craft and had owned that over 30 years. And so I got to spend my first year literally driving around Hollywood and just sort of learning how things are working and how things are set up. And at the same time that I was writing, and one of the things that we again that we fell back into was focus on authentic storytelling. That's how things resonate with people, right? Is if Connor, you may have never served in the military. I have never lived in Portsmouth, Ohio until last year. I don't know a lot about Portsmouth. I definitely didn't know a lot about the West Portsmouth. I'm just finding the Shawnee. I didn't have that experience, but I do understand what it's like to live in a small town. And if you can connect on that authentic level, you will find an audience out there. And so that's what we were able to do for those that have served, those that continue to serve, and for those that were just interested in the military. We really leaned in on authenticity. We said, what are the things that are going to make our audience get excited, right? It's the unknown story you've ever had on the battlefield. It's the inside. What did the Medal of Honor recipients say before they went out and did their heroic deed? I mean, these were the levels of things that we went into, and I've just been amazed. I thought I knew a lot of stuff about the military. I didn't. I didn't, and I didn't have a lot of experiences that other people had, and that's what we were able to really get into, is that authenticity, and that's how we grew our platform. We started on social media, we grew, specifically Facebook, then we expanded from Facebook to Instagram, then we expanded from that into film and television, and so the idea is to continue to build different packages of storytelling, but it all comes back to the idea of be authentic. And I'll tell you this, I mean, the specific examples, I mean, anybody who's a military historian knows, like, call out one aircraft and say it's, call out a P-51, but it's really a Spitfire, right? If you don't know what you're talking about, you've lost your audience.
Sure.
So that's where we have
they'll
to
let you know.
They'll 100% let you know. And there's been a lot of times that I've had to be like, yeah, you're actually right. Like, good call, right? And we'll change it. But a lot of the, we spend a lot of time making sure that, the content that we put out, whether it's on the website, whether it's on social, whether it's on TV, is authentic. And that comes down to the team's commitment, and also comes down to us as storytellers saying, we're going to go the extra mile to do that.
Yeah, that's definitely like driving home the point. I get a lot of people that like ask me questions about, or I know like a little bit about Facebook ads or some kind of advertising, so like love to pick your brain about this or this. But the hardest point to like drive home is that it's reliable. It's relying on the creative. Like, that is the underlying factor. Like, you can put as much money as you want behind it. You can like target the exact right audience. But if you're not coming off authentic, it doesn't matter if you use a production camera or your phone. You know what I mean? Like,
doesn't matter.
Right.
Our job as storytellers is to have a human emotion, is to make somebody feel in a connection with us. And this is the same thing, Facebook is going to do what Facebook's going to do. The more people that have a human interaction, it's easier it's going to be for you to get that out on Facebook. Same thing, and I hear this all the time. Do I need a Hollywood agent to sell a script or do it? No. You need a good script. You need a good piece of content that makes people feel something. That's our job as storytellers. And that's no different than sitting around the fire 40,000 years ago talking to people and saying, hey, I went out and saw this really crazy thing on the hunt today, right? That's a human emotion, and that's what our job is to do. And so my lens has been, I'm going to take that military experience. I'm going to take that experience that I had over 15 years from, coming from small town Texas through the academy and the Marines. I then went over to the Army and the Special Forces. That's a whole different story for maybe another time. But take those experiences that I have and lend it to having a human emotion that everybody can understand, whether they served or not.
Yeah, and as you've, I guess, acclimated to the area, Chase, and just spend more time in Portsmouth, Ohio, is there, like, for people that want to, or that aspire to be in some kind of position like yours, creating things they care about, I guess, what do you have to say to those people? Anything else to elaborate on?
I mean, I think it's, at the end of the day, it comes down to passion. And then, like I said, when you're sitting around and you're watching, whether it be in your hometown or a big city or traveling, whatever, I mean, we all have these interactions daily. And those are the things that I try to capture off of. And I've had a few here in Portsmouth, where I get to meet somebody new that I've never had a chance to meet somebody like that before or have a different experience. But those are real. Those are real moments that you try to capture and try to replicate on film.
Chase, end the podcast here with just a little bit about maybe one of your more impactful experiences overseas, or like stories that stick with you, experiences that you live that you think have most impacted your career. I'm just looking for like your specific experience. I know, for example, just Dale, you coming back to your hometown after being in Iraq, it was those specific experiences that you had that helped you, do what you're doing with the opioid crisis and this kind of thing. So what makes Chase Millsap tick? Is there a specific story?
I mean, I'll just tell you the most recent one.
Yeah.
So my wife, Miley, and shout out to her, and my daughter Luna have been here since November and haven't gone back yet. Our stuff is still in LA, by the way. Her truck's still in LA. Like,
it's all just sitting in the driveway.
It's just sitting there, right? And we came to Portsmouth thinking that we were going to stay for the holidays, and then we just never left, right? We fell in love with it. And
that happens around here.
It happens, right? And I'm not looking back. In the midst of that, I was also working on a TV show about Afghanistan, USFL, as we talked about, and the real world experience that was. I've never been in Afghanistan. I don't speak the language. I don't know a lot about the cultural side of it. But what I do know is that, I've had experiences, and this will sound weird, but it's truth. Like, I've already done one global crisis. I lived that, right? I filmed it, and it was a lot. And as things were happening in Afghanistan this past August, there were a few of us that got phone calls, mostly in the middle of the night, from people begging for help. And begging for help to get to the gates, begging for help for others that were there. And for me, and my very personal experience was, I had some writers on the show whose family was still there. And what I didn't know is I didn't know the specifics of the gates. I've never been to Kabul airport. I didn't know any of that, but I knew what it took to act to help those people. Because I'd lived it. I've done it, and in a lot of ways I became the old man. Very quickly, despite being, here in Portsmouth, I very quickly became on Kabul time. You're 8.5 hours ahead. You start operating on there. You're up all night. You're up in the morning. Like, for 2 weeks of my life, this was it. And I was right here in Portsmouth. In fact, some of the legends may have seen me come into class looking a little ragged, and it's because I'd been on my phone for days, trying to coordinate between people I knew in the military inside the gates of the airport, people that were outside that were trying to get in, and in the midst of that, you've got a lot of really scary stuff going on, right? There's the Taliban that have taken over. There's ISIS going on, and I know this is a pretty wholesome podcast. I don't want to get into all of it, but there's a real world out there, right? There's scary stuff that happens in the world. I learned that very early on. But I also learned that you get to choose how afraid you want to be, right? You can choose. I can be afraid of ISIS and those sort of things, or you can choose not to be, and just understand that they're a human being just like me, and okay, I can figure that out. And that was a mentality I built over years and years and years. So here I was in Portsmouth, Ohio, and working one of my last cases, and this was a pregnant woman who was 4 months pregnant, who had 3 failed attempts to get through the gate. I'd spent 10 days working on this. I knew the gates were closing. That the explosion had already happened at the airport, and I was starting to break. I was getting to my personal limits here, and I looked around, and some of the guys at the gym helped me with this, and I thought back to what my grandfather said in his credit, and I said, I'm going to help these people, and went out one night. It was a Friday night, and literally sat out at my wife's house, or my wife's mother-in-law's place in West Portsmouth, and worked all night to the point where I had to talk to the Taliban, and they came in through the gate with minutes to spare. And that family is now in Los Angeles, home with one of those writers.
Wow, man.
And I will tell you this, I never planned that. I didn't expect it. I didn't know what I was going to do when that came to me. Honestly, I'm a little too old for that stuff now. It hurts you a lot more when you stay up for 10 days straight, with very little sleep, by the way. But what it told me was, not only do I have the storytelling skills, but I have the skills where, if you really believe in something, you just stick with it and you keep doing it. And I think that same mentality is what I see from a lot of people here. There's a lot of people that are really tough here in Portsmouth and in the surrounding area. And I was going to be damned if I was going to sit by and let something happen that I had the power to help and just sit by and do nothing. And so there was no way in hell, that's how you get the title, there's no way in hell I was going to not act. And that's what I did. And so that literally was this last August.
Yeah, Chase, that's amazing, man, especially since you were thousands of miles away. There's an ocean between you, and there's so many barriers to entry. I mean, you're operating on your phone in the middle of the night, and and so that's
Shout out to Signal. Yeah, by the way,
was it Signal?
It was all Signal.
Wow. Yeah, Chase, thanks so much for sharing your experience, man. I think a lot of people are going to find value in it, just tactically how you're using your real world experience to create things that you're passionate about and that are helping other people, legitimately changing lives. So appreciate your time with us, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate what you guys are doing, and this is the whole point, man. Being able to tell these stories, have an effect on other people, so we can keep doing what we're doing and make the world a better place.
Cheers to that, bro.
Cheers to that.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody.